So this armor tutorial was a joint project between my brother and I, so it'll be partially filmed and narrated by me, and partially filmed and narrated by my brother.
Good evening, London.
Yeah, that's him. So just as a heads up, part of this is a pepakura tutorial, so it will not be one of my usual simple tutorials. This is a very in-depth tutorial.
Interrupt your regularly scheduled tutorial.
Nah, yeah, you don't. The technique my brother uses to make the armor itself is a very time-consuming process consisting of cutting pieces out of foam, hardening, and painting them. Some of the parts he missed filming as well, so hopefully the narration will fill it in. If you have any questions, post them below and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Okay, take it away, guy. So you want to start by printing out the pieces of the pattern, and I'll put the link to this pattern in the description box. You want to print those out and then cut them out of cardstock or paper. And then you want to transfer them onto foam, trace them onto some 3mm craft foam, and then you'll cut those out with an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. So once he had the pieces cut out, my brother took a heat gun and he heated up the pieces of foam, and then he formed them around the pieces of his body that they had to fit on, in this case the knee pads. Then he let them cool so they would hold that shape once they were done. To get the cylinders on the side of the knee pads, he took a couple of Nerf darts and then hot glued them onto the side of the knee pads. Made a little shelf with some thicker foam and then hot glued the darts right onto that little shelf. And then just wrapped a few thin pieces of craft foam around it to give it some texture. So then he just took some regular white glue, and he dumped that into a cup. You don't need a lot, just enough to cover your piece of foam. And then just take a foam brush. You just want to cover the outside and the inside with several coats of glue. If the glue's too thick, you can water it down a little bit, but then you'll have to do more coats. Usually about 3 coats of straight glue is good, so if you water it down, you'll have to compensate for that and do more coats. Just coat both sides of all your armor pieces. So once the coats of glue were dry, he took some plastidip and he coated 2 coats on the outside and then 1 coat on the underside. You'll want to wait in between each coat for it to dry before you put on the second and third one. But you do 2 coats on the top and then 1 coat on the bottom or the inside. So then the cod piece, which you just saw him painting a second ago, he cut out of thicker foam. This is the EVA foam, which you can get at places like Lowe's, or I think Walmart has it as well. It's much thicker than the craft foam, so it makes it a little sturdier. And he did the same thing he did with the other armor pieces, heating it up with a heat gun and forming it around his body.
I'm going to cut these out here, these little parts that I've outlined with a pen, and not completely, but just enough. And I'm going to finish dremeling them out, and then after I do that, I intend to glue buckles in there to make the buckle system invisible.
So once he finished cutting out and dremeling those little indentations, he took his glue gun and put some glue right in the little indentations so he could glue the buckles in. And if you get too much in there, it doesn't matter because it's on the inside, so no one will see it. And so then he just slid a little buckle, plastic buckle, at least part of one, right into that. And so that will allow the buckle to be hidden. This is how he puts on the cod piece and the shoulder armor as well.
And now we can take the 2 sides, buckle them together. All you gotta do is press the little button inside, make them apart. Okay, now I'm going to experiment with making dents here. I'm going to try and get this here done and this here done. I'm just going to outline it with this tool here. It's real nice and thin, and then I'll probably switch over to like one of these 3 tools, do the middle. So here we go.
So the reason he's dremeling out these pieces, these little holes, is to make the battle damage that appears on much of Boba's costume. So you just want to outline them with a small piece and then dremel them out with a bigger piece. It doesn't have to be even.
And voila, you have dents here.
So then he took some dry decks and he smoothed it over the seams and all the parts where multiple pieces of armor connected. And he put a little bit in the battle damage dents just to give them a slightly smoother appearance, as if the battle damage had been there a while. It goes on pink initially, and then it dries white, neither of which matters because you'll be spray painting everything in a minute anyway. And then he cut the chest armor plates out of that same thick gray EVA foam. And then he did the same thing with the piece for the back, cutting it out of thick gray EVA foam and forming it with the heat gun. Then he added details with some more of the thick gray foam. So then you want to paint all of your armor pieces with some chrome silver spray paint. Then take some painter's tape and mask off the parts you want to stay silver. In this case, on the knee pads, the cylinders, you want to stay silver, so mask them off with some painter's tape. And so then you want to take either some ketchup or some mustard and pour a little bit in a cup, and then take your paintbrush, get a little bit of the ketchup and mustard on there, and just dab it onto your silver armor pieces, kind of a haphazard manner wherever you want the battle damage to show through later on. Just gonna dab it on there. And then just give it a coating of the final paint color. In the case of the knee pads, it's going to be yellow, but if you're doing other parts of the armor, it might have to be green or whatever color it's going to be, depending on which part you're doing. And you just paint right over the ketchup or mustard that you put on for battle damage. Just be careful not to get the nozzle too close, or you might leave a mark or a line in the mustard. And you'll do the same thing to the pieces where you dremeled out battle damage as well. Just put a little mustard right in there, and then just spray paint right over the top of those.
Now after it's dried, you want to give it lots of time to dry. But after it's dry, you just want to wipe away at the honey mustard just a little bit at a time. And then after you do that, you just want to very slowly peel all your painter's tape off. And voila, your knee pads are done.
And the battle damage doesn't have to be deep. You can dremel down just a little bit and do the mustard to make light battle damage as well. So Boba's clothes were kind of a greenish color, but I couldn't really find a greenish color, so I just settled for beige. It seemed to work pretty well. And so I got a turtleneck and a pair of sweatpants in the same color. So I had to make the cape before I attached any of the armor, so I just took a rectangle of some green fabric. So I took one corner of the rectangular fabric and laid it on the shoulder, and then I just took a needle and thread and hand sewed it firmly in place. And so then that just trails down the back at a diagonal. And then I just laid all the armor pieces out where they had to be sitting, and then I hot glued them all in place. So for the belt, I glued together a stack of cardboard pieces. Then I got a piece of fake leather, and I just glued the leather up around that. And I made quite a few of these little boxes in this way. And then I just glued all those little boxes to the middle of a second-hand belt, and the belt will fasten in the back. And so then these were all some little pieces that my brother had made out of foam, so then I just cut some material the same color as the pants, just a nice square of material, and I put some hot glue along the edges, make kind of a little pocket. You just want to measure how wide your little implements are, and just glue around them. You don't want the pocket to be open all the way, you want to have a seam in the middle to hold everything in place. Boba also had several other pockets in his pants, which I made by just taking some more squares of that material that was the same color as the pants, and then just gluing them in place. These are fake pockets, they will not actually hold anything. And a few of the pockets were kind of weird. They had like a little diagonal strip over them. So I just folded one of the squares at a diagonal to make the diagonal slit for the pocket. And again, these are purely for looks. They won't actually hold anything because they're just hot glued on. And then I just hot glued some straps to the back side of the knee pads. You can just tie those around the back side of the knee to get them. And to finish off the belt, I laid out a rectangle of some more of that beige material, glued another square onto one end. To make a pocket, you want to leave the one end open so you can shove stuff inside. I took some scrap material, put it inside to fill it up, and then I hot glued it around the belt so that it'd mimic those little patches that he had on the sides of his belt, and then just hot glue the flap down. That'll hold everything in place. Then I put one on the other side as well. So then for the braids, I just took some yarn in each of the 3 colors, and I made some long braids, and I just attached those to the shoulders with a needle and thread. And so then here is what the full costume looks like when it's all put together. The helmet and the gauntlets are made a little bit differently, so I have a different video that shows how to make them because they're actually made out of cardstock to make them a little more substantial, but I will be explaining that in the other video.